This country was built on a distinctly American work ethic. But today, work is in trouble. We've outsourced most of our manufacturing to other countries. And with that, we sent away good jobs and diminished our capability to make things. American Giant is a clothing company that's pushing back against this tide. They make a variety of high-quality clothing and activewear, like sweatshirts, jeans, dresses, jackets, and so much more. All made right here in the USA, from growing the cotton to adding the final touches. So when you buy American Giant, you create jobs for seamsters, cutters, and factory workers in towns and cities across the United States. And it's about more than an income. Jobs bring pride, purpose. They stitch people together. If all that sounds good to you, visit American-Giant.com and get 20% off your first order when you use code STAPLE20 at checkout. That's 20% off your first order at American-Giant.com with promo code STAPLE20.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its host, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss the murder in your family on this podcast, please be sure to visit themurderinmyfamily.com for more information. You can support this podcast by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. This episode may contain unsettling material or subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
Thank you for joining me for episode 46 of The Murder in My Family. If you find that you enjoy this podcast, please take a minute to rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast so that the show can continue to grow and reach new listeners. To learn more about the show or the cases we discuss, please visit themurderinmyfamily.com. You can also find us on Twitter with the handle @MurderInMyFam or by searching for the Murder in My Family podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to support the show through a Patreon donation, it's always appreciated. And you can do so by visiting patreon.com/themurderinmyfamily. Benefits of supporting the show on Patreon include early access to ad-free episodes of the show, plus bonus content not heard in regular episodes. Support may also include thank you cards, stickers, and more. If you prefer to, you can also support the show through a PayPal donation by visiting paypal.me/themurderinmyfamily. In each episode, I'll give shoutouts to any new supporters. And thank you to all of the supporters that generously donate to help keep the show growing and improving. Before we get started with this episode, I just wanted to update you on something I mentioned in the last episode regarding the American Crime Festival. It was scheduled to happen here in South Jersey this November. Unfortunately, the event has been postponed until a later date. If and when I get more details, I'll be sure to share them with you. Thank you, and now on with the show. This episode is timely because it's being released in October, which is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and this case deals with that very topic. In 2018, the nonprofit organization Violence Policy Center, based out of Washington, D.C., conducted a study called The American Roulette and found that 663 people died in the United States during the first 6 months of 2017 in murder-suicide incidents. Florida ranks third as the highest number of murder-suicide deaths and cases in the country, trailing behind Texas and California. So far in 2019 alone, Florida has had several murder-suicides, and one of them we are discussing in this episode. While most murder-suicides involve a man and a woman, that isn't always the case. In March of 2019, the lives of two young men ended after a jealous rage, which turned into a murder-suicide in a small town in the panhandle of Florida. Their deaths devastated loved ones who were left behind. Michael Paul Burke was born on December 20th, 1982, to Joe and Martha Burke. He was a graduate of Liberty County High School in Bristol, Florida, and he loved to hunt and fish. He worked for Southeast Shipbuilders in Panama City and lived in Hosford. On the night of March 23, 2019, Michael was visiting the home of Kimberly Story Geiger, a mother of two that he was dating. Kimberly lived at the corner of Highway 67 and Blueberry Trail in Tologia. just a few miles south of Hosford. At the time, Kimberly was estranged from her husband, 31-year-old Dustin Martin, who lived in Quincy, Florida. The couple had one child together, a 2-year-old boy named Landry, and they shared visitation. Dustin had a daughter from a previous relationship, and Kimberly had an 8-year-old daughter from a previous marriage. Earlier in the day, Dustin picked Landry up from Kimberly's house, and that afternoon, he returned him without incident and left the premises. At around 9 p.m. that night, Michael Paul Burke was visiting Kimberly and her 2 kids when Dustin drove by Kimberly's house and noticed Michael's truck parked in the driveway. For some reason, maybe out of jealousy, Dustin flew into a wild rage. He stopped his truck on the road, walked over to Michael's truck, and slashed the tires. Michael saw Dustin from the window and went outside to confront him. The two got into a fight, and suddenly, without warning, Dustin stabbed Michael multiple times with a knife used to slash the tires. Wounded and bleeding, Michael ran back into Kimberly's house and locked the door. Meanwhile, Dustin went back to his truck and grabbed a pistol. He returned to the house and realized it was locked, so he busted a window and crawled through, entering the home. Dustin stormed through the house looking for Michael. He found him in a back room where he was taking care of his wounds. Dustin then shot Michael twice and hit him at least once in the back, killing him. At 9:35 p.m., Liberty County Sheriff's Office deputies responded to a 911 call about a physical altercation at Kimberly's residence. The caller told the operator that at least one of the men was armed with a gun. By the time they arrived on scene, both men were dead. Kimberly told the deputies what happened between Dustin and Michael. She also said that after Dustin killed Michael, he walked into the living room where she was and stood in front of her, but he didn't speak. Instead, he put the gun to his head and pulled the trigger, killing himself. Thankfully, Kimberly and her children were not injured, but the trauma they endured will likely have long-lasting effects. Not long after the shootings, the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Lab was sent to the scene, and the bodies were taken to the medical examiner's office in Tallahassee. Autopsies were performed by the Second Circuit Medical Examiner's Office, and the deaths were officially ruled murder-suicide. Liberty County Sheriff Eddie Joe White, who was Michael Paul Burke's cousin, said he was not aware of any previous conflicts between Michael and Dustin.
On the surface, it seems surprising to many that Dustin might be capable of such violence. After all,
he had a good job as a journeyman lineman with Talcon Electric, where he had been employed for 13 years. According to his obituary, he was a loyal friend and loved by those that knew him, and was always willing to help a friend in need. We will never truly know why Dustin Martin snapped and ended his own life, and that of Michael Burke's. But on that fateful night, he did far more damage than end 2 lives. His children will grow up without a father, and the families of both men will never be the same again.
But to Kim, it wasn't a total shock, because she had witnessed firsthand moments of physical violence and threats at the hands of her husband. She was so scared that she backed out of filing a restraining order against him, because she was afraid of what he might do when he found out about it.
Kimberly Story Geiger joined me to recount that painful and horrific night in March 2019 and discuss how she's trying to move forward. That conversation is coming up in just a moment. Hi, Kimberly. Thanks for joining me to discuss Michael's case with us.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
So you're sharing something with us today that's still, I assume, very fresh in your mind. It happened only months ago in March of this year. Am I correct in assuming that you wanted to get this story out because you feel that maybe it'll help others or be a warning to people, somebody out there that might be in a similar situation to yours?
Yes, absolutely. I think this situation maybe could have been dealt with a different avenue had law enforcement stepped in the multiple times I've reached out to them for their help.
And you didn't get anywhere with that?
No. after multiple phone calls, that he was never arrested. There was never a restraining order put on him or anything after several calls to the police department.
And a bit of a backstory here, and feel free to correct this as needed, but you were married once and had one child, and then you got remarried to Dustin Martin, and together you had a child. But it was during that
Correct.
second marriage to Dustin that things happened that led you to seek a divorce. And I assume some of that stuff was related to abuse or physical violence?
Correct. For the first few years of our relationship, it was pretty normal. Actually, I thought he was kind of like the perfect husband. He was the poster child for the man that you hope to marry. He would bring me flowers. We'd go on surprise dates, run the bath, bring me wine, and, bring me a glass of wine to sit in the tub and relax. And just, really, I thought he was the perfect guy. And it wasn't until after my son was born, we got married, and my dad passed, that I really kind of seen a different side to him that I had no idea existed.
And what do you think caused that change?
He was really adamant from the very beginning when we get married, and I wasn't so sure about that because I had just got out of a marriage. We were actually in the middle of a divorce when me and Dustin started dating, but me and my first husband had been separated for quite some time. So I was just reluctant to get back in that situation, and that was something that it seemed to be very important to him. And I feel like once I took that step, it kind of gave him the possession, I guess, over me. It's the only way I can describe it.
And how long were you married to him?
We got married in December of 2016, and our divorce would have been final April of 2019.
Did you notice once you felt that, you mentioned your father passed away, and then around the same time this change happened in him? Was it gradual or was it sudden, and how long did it go on for?
He had expressed to me a little bit of he didn't actually physically put his hands on me, but he had done things in the past that made me feel like he could have, but he just brushed it off like, ha ha ha, I was just joking with you. Like, he pushed me on the bed and then jumped on the bed and was like wrestling with me. Well, acted like it was a joke and, no big deal. And then shortly after we got married, my dad passed. It really just escalated. We went from arguing one day, and he grabbed me by the throat, flung me into the wall in front of the kids, and that was the first time he had ever done anything of that nature.
So you felt a definite, like a line had been crossed, and he had changed drastically.
Yes.
And I guess at some point, after dealing with it, you decided that it was better and safer for you and your kids to leave Dustin. And I can only imagine it wasn't going to be easy leaving, but at the same time, you think it's best for you and your kids to start to move on with your life and get this divorce in the process. And it was being finalized, and that's when you began dating Michael Burke. Tell us a little
Right.
about Michael.
Me and Michael are from the same town. He was a little bit older than me. We're from a really small town, one caution light, so everybody knows everybody. And he and I just kind of reconnected via Snapchat, just become friends, and we went on a date, and pretty much from then on out, we were together. But that was, end of August, early September, and me and Dustin had separated in July. So it was pretty quickly after. But Dustin had already moved in with another woman. Like, he and her were supposed to be engaged, and I was under the impression that both of us were going on with our own life and that everyone was happy.
So you're just trying to move on. Things are going good for you. It seems like he's moving on his end. Was there any animosity? Did he have, any issues with Michael personally before you started dating him? Had they known each other?
He had only met Michael once before in like a group setting. Like I said, we're from a really small town, so he had met Michael in that group setting, and I think that kind of made him feel as if maybe something had been going on previously before our separation, but it had not. And I just think, maybe because we're all from the same town, hung out with the same crowd, maybe that's what caused him to have issues with Michael specifically. But yeah, I think it definitely was a specific issue with Michael.
And so this day happens. It's March 23rd this year, 2019. And Michael shows up. He's at your house. Is he living with you or just visiting, or?
No, he was just visiting.
Just visiting. Okay.
He actually lived about an hour and a half away from here, so we would only see each other every weekend, every other weekend, depending on our schedule with my kids, because he didn't have children and things like that.
So Dustin shows up at this point. Was he expected there, or did he show up out of the blue?
Well, actually, we had some issues after the separation. Our main issue was custody of our son, who at the time of the separation had just turned 2. Like I said, we separated in September, at the end of August, beginning of September, which would have been right when the baby turned 2. And I had found out he had been leaving the baby with people that I wasn't really comfortable with the baby being with, so we had a really big issue about that. So actually the day of the murder, I had scheduled a visitation for Dustin and Landry at my home. Dustin was supposed to come over to the house. I told him he couldn't take the baby because I wasn't comfortable with who he was around and who he had my child around. But if he would like to spend time with his son, then he was more than welcome to do that. He could just do it at my house until, we got something concrete through the court system. And he was fine with that. I even told him, when you come, bring a pack of diapers, because he wasn't helping me financially whatsoever at that point. And so he was like, okay, no problem. And he stopped by Walmart, brought a pack of diapers, and spent probably from, I would say, 12 to 6 p.m., 12 lunchtime until 6 p.m. with his son at the house, at my house.
And was there some altercation between him and Michael?
Well, Michael had not showed up at this point. He was Dustin was just here spending time with the baby. And he actually took the baby uptown, got the baby a snack, brought the baby back. The baby was asleep, and then Dustin left. And then a few hours later is when Michael showed up after he got off work. So I'm assuming after the 6 p.m. drop-off, when he dropped the baby off, he must not have ever actually left town, because shortly after that, he starts calling my phone and sending text messages talking about what's he doing there, this, that, and the other. Just really, really irate. Even though he knew earlier in the day that, Michael was coming over, because he had even said, "What's your boyfriend coming over?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he kind of made a joke about it and left. So he knew he was going to be visiting that afternoon. So I'm not sure what sparked it to have him so upset about the situation right then.
And so I guess he's mad that Michael's there. That's the whole crux of it.
Yeah. Which really never made sense to anyone, because, it was well known that we had been together, that I was spending weekends over there with him, and it wasn't like it was this was the first time he ever found out about it. It had been going on for several months. Wow.
And so was it just a sudden, did he walk up to him and just pick a fight with him? I mean, were there words exchanged when they confronted each other? What happened?
He had been calling my phone back to back. Michael's in the kitchen. I'm in the kitchen. He goes, "Oh my God, just call the cops. Just don't even engage with him about this. Just call the cops and let them deal with it." I'm like, okay. And so I'm searching Liberty County Sheriff's Office number, because I didn't think it was a 911 situation at that point. I thought he was just, calling and riding down the road, revving up his engine and trying to make sure that he was known that he was around. And the next thing I know, he starts pounding on the door. Dustin started pounding on the door. Well, when he started pounding on the door, Michael went to the door and snatched the door open, and words were exchanged between the two of them, and I was not standing close enough so I could see who threw the first punch, but they were just, the next thing I know, they were just entangled, fighting.
And then it escalated from there, from fighting to gunshots.
He and Michael and Dustin were fighting, and they would, fight for a minute and break apart, and then they would fight. They would connect again, and it went on for. It seemed like a long time to me, but it probably wasn't. It seemed like a really long time. But finally, at the end of the fight, like when the fight finally ended, they were in the ditch of my yard, and the neighbor had come over and was actually calling 911 because she'd seen everything that was going on. And Michael had Dustin pinned on his back in the ditch of my yard, and that's when Michael started screaming that Dustin had stabbed him. So at that point, I told Michael, I'm like, get off of him, just get off of him, just get off of him, and come inside. So Michael grabbed his arms and kind of threw him off of him and tried to come inside. When Michael got up, Dustin got up and was trying to chase him around the yard with waving the knife. Michael went around his truck trying to avoid him, and when he got to the front of the truck by my front door to my home, I opened the door and he come inside, and I padlocked the door. And at that point, the neighbor was on the phone to the cops because I had screamed at her to call 911. And we're in here, and I'm checking on Michael. I get a towel, and I'm like, where were you stuck? I could see that there was blood, but I couldn't really tell how deep or where or anything. And I was trying to see how serious his injuries were and where they were at. And I got him a towel, and I'm like, here, just put this on there, and I'm going to call 911. And he obviously didn't think it was very serious because he was like, no, don't call 911. You can just take me to the emergency room. And I'm like, okay, well, let me just check you out, put this on there. Let's see, how, let me get somebody to come over here with the kids, blah, 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 blah. Well, the next thing I know, Dustin's back at the door, pounding at the door, pounding at the door, pounding at the door. And I didn't answer. I was hoping he would just go away or the cops would show up in the meantime. And they never did. Well, the next thing I know, he bust through the front window of the home. When he busted through the window of the home, I told Michael, I said, just go to my bedroom and lock the door. Just go to my bedroom and lock the door. And Dustin knocked the window out with his hand or gun or whatever. I'm not sure what he used because there was a curtain in the way, but you could just hear the window crashing. And he snatched the curtain back and pointed the gun at me, and he said, to bring that MFer out here. And I told him, I said, Dustin, please don't do this. Your son's in here. Your son's in the bedroom. And he was like, bring him out. And I said, I'm not, please don't do this. Your son's in here. And when I wouldn't go get Michael or call Michael to come to the front, he come through the window, brushed past me, went straight to the master bedroom, and I heard 2 gunshots. And then seconds later, he come back into the living room as if he was leaving, going to go out the front door, and he paused and put the gun to the side of his head and pulled the trigger.
And this is going on obviously while your children are around. Did they see?
It was about 9:30, so they had already been put in bed. But the location of where the shots were fired was maybe, and this is being generous, maybe 6 or 7 foot from my child's bed, from my son's bed.
So when these shots rang out, I mean, how was it? Startling? Was it surprising? I mean, what goes through your head at that time and when that happened?
Honestly, the only thing I could think of in my mind was, no, this not really happening. Like, this can't really be happening. This can't really be happening. And even after I seen Dustin come in here and shoot himself, I'm standing here in the living room just sitting here because I honestly couldn't even process what had just happened. And it probably took me 2 days really to come out of that shock situation because I just remember just standing here and thinking, oh my God, what just happened? How
soon did you realize that men were hurt or dead, or did you know that right away?
I knew immediately that Dustin was dead because of his injury. I could look and tell that he was dead. And Michael had left from my bedroom and went to the spare bathroom, I guess trying to get away from him. And he was laid up against my bathroom door, the spare bathroom door, and I pushed my way in there, and I could. He was not deceased at that very point in time, but I knew that it was very, 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 very bad.
Imagine you're a business owner relying on a dozen different software programs, each one disconnected, more expensive, and more complicated than the last. It can be incredibly stressful, right? Now, picture Odoo. Odoo brings all the tools your business needs into one simple platform. CRM, accounting, inventory, manufacturing, marketing, HR, and more. All seamlessly connected. Everything works together, giving you the peace of mind that your business is running smoothly from every angle. Odoo's open source applications are user-friendly and designed to scale with your business, saving you time and money. Say goodbye to juggling multiple platforms and hello to efficient, integrated management. Stop wasting resources on complicated systems and make the switch to Odoo today. Visit odoo.com, ODOO.com, and discover how Odoo can simplify and streamline your business operations. Odoo, modern management made simple.
The EMTs are called, police are called, they get there, and how did they treat Michael? Was he responsive? Was he unconscious?
By that time, he had already passed. I was in there checking on him. After everything had happened, after I realized the threat was gone, and I was getting the mommy mode, and I'm like, okay, let me go check on him. Oh my God, my kid's okay. So I go in there and check on my kids, and the baby was starting to get up. I guess the noise had woke him up, but my daughter was still asleep. She was 8. She was 7 at that point. No, she had just turned 8 at that point in time, but she slept through it all. But the baby was getting up and stirring. And so I grabbed the baby and took him to the neighbor's house. And then I come in here and tried to check Michael's pulse and things like that. And that's when I realized that I couldn't find a pulse. So by the time the deputies came, they had already basically called the ambulance off because they knew that both of them were deceased at that point in time.
And that's, I don't know what goes through your mind. Here you have the father of one of your children and the man that you're now dating that are both dead. Was that numb? I mean, what do you feel in that moment?
Yeah, I'm not really sure I was even feeling anything at that point in time. I just couldn't believe it had happened. I was just in disbelief. This is a small town, we graduate in classes of 60. You don't think things like this happen in your town, and especially not to you. Yeah. And I guess I was just kind of in that shock state. It took me several days to finally really come to the realization that this is really what has happened.
And then what happens after that? Are you just searching for answers, wondering why he did that and how it happened? How it came to be?
My big question is why he, what set him off to that point. I got the toxicology report back, thinking maybe he had been on some drugs or was intoxicated, and he was negative for everything. He had, I think, a blood alcohol level of 0.06, which is not even legally intoxicated, so he had maybe had a beer or so, and he was completely sober. So it completely shocked me that he went to that extreme when 3 hours before that he was here with the baby and me and him were getting along fine, and when he left he was laughing and joking to go and coming back and taking someone else's life and his own.
And so looking back, or maybe with what the police determined or what you think, do you think that Dustin came to the house that day planning on shooting Michael?
I personally don't. The reason I say that is Dustin, I don't feel like it's the type of person who would be able to go to prison. I don't think he could live with that type of lifestyle. So the only thing he could live with is what happened. If he took someone else's life, I feel like he took his own. That's the reason he took his own life, was to not be held accountable for it. And I don't feel like he anticipated on this whole thing happening the way it did happen, because I had checked his. But I really just went through everything in my mind that I could think of, trying to figure out what would have set him off. And I had checked his, bank statements and stuff like that. He had paid his bills that day. I don't think earlier in the day that was ever a thought in his mind. Just something snapped, and I can't understand what caused it. But I definitely don't think he come here with the intention of that happening.
Yeah, because somebody that's planning on killing somebody else and then killing themselves isn't going to pay their bills that day, most likely.
Right. And he was one of those that was a receipt keeper. So when I got his possessions back, I went through his wallet, and there was the receipts from that day, because he would put his receipts in his wallet, and this was 3 hours before. Somebody who's planning to come and murder someone and kill themselves doesn't care about the $13 they spent at the convenience store 3 hours before that. It never made sense. I don't feel like he was planning it. I think it was just something that snapped in him, and I'm not sure what caused it, but I definitely don't think it was something that he had planned.
So 6 months later, after the fact, it doesn't make sense, and do you think that years from now you'll still be thinking the same thing, that it just doesn't make sense and you don't have all the answers?
Yes. Because Dustin's personality was very non-confrontational, which is what throws me for the biggest loop of all. He's not one of those type of people to initiate a fight. He's not one of those type of people to show up at somebody's house like he showed up. That's just not his character. He had a lot of anger issues, and I know he was on some antidepressants and stuff trying to get himself together, but he was just, his personality was not the type of person who would show up at somebody's house with intentions to do something like that. I would have never in a million years thought he would have showed up here with Michael here, because he's just not a confrontational person.
And was he known to carry a gun with him, or?
Yes. He always kept a pistol in his truck. He always. But, like I said, we're from the country. You're out in the woods, snakes, go on the boat, moccasins, things like that. So for people to carry around here, it's no big. I mean, it's very, very, very common, and he always kept his gun in his truck.
And I guess if there's any kind of positive to come out of this, it's that you and the kids weren't harmed.
Yes. I do feel like after he stabbed Michael that he already knew that we had called 911, so the deputies would be here. And I do think at that point is when he decided to kill, because he went back to his truck and loaded 3 rounds in his gun specifically, and he shot and fired at Michael. Once missed him, shot him with the second round, and then the third round he used on himself. But I do believe that he come in here to kill all three of us.
Oh my gosh. And how do you deal with the aftermath? Have you or the kids had to have any kind of counseling or talk to anybody to try and help work your way through all what you're feeling and dealing with?
He was kind of absent from the baby's life, so the baby has asked a few questions, where's Daddy? Is that Daddy's truck? And things like that. And other than that, life is exactly the same as it was before, because he was not a constant, everyday figure in my son's life. My daughter, however, has been in counseling ever since. She has a counselor at her school that she sees a few times a week. And I do go and see a PTSD counselor several times a month.
And do you feel that's helping you to work your way through this?
I feel like it's so fresh. I don't know if it's one of those things that time just will have to heal, because I don't feel like I'm, recover overnight, but I feel like it's worth a try to try it, to just try to work through it. But I don't know that it's ever going to be anything that I can rationalize in my head. I don't know. It really has just completely flipped our whole world upside down.
And you mentioned, it's still fresh, and maybe a year from now, maybe 2 years from now, at some point in the future, you'll have a different outlook or look at things from a different view.
Yes, I hope so. The thing that makes me so angry about the situation is the numerous amounts of calls that I made to the sheriff's office. The times that the sheriff's office came over there and didn't arrest him, he had threatened to kill himself before, and the sheriff's department come over there and did not even correct him. They just told him to go stay at a friend's house. He showed up at his mom's house when I come to pick up our son before and slammed me into the car. His mother even admitted to seeing it. And the deputy said because he didn't physically put his hands on me because he hit me with his chest, that wasn't battery. They never once arrested him. I had pictures of handprints around my throat. I had witnesses where he had two who had seen him do it and one who he had admitted to putting his hands on me. I had text messages from his mother and him admitting to, seeing all this and him doing all this, and nothing was ever done on their part. And this happened literally 2 weeks after I moved back to my hometown to get away from that county, hoping to find safety over here where I'm from.
And that didn't work. And unfortunately,
no, I literally uprooted my children and moved back home, 45 minutes out of the way, to be around my family, to be around, my oldest child's dad, to be around, my friends and my support system. And it was not even 2 weeks from the time I moved to the time the incident happened.
Wow. I know, we're talking about how fresh this is, but if there's somebody out there that's like going through what you went through, and they're in a kind of situation like this, based on the experience you went through and the 6 months that's gone by since, what advice would you give somebody if there's somebody out there listening that has a similar situation they're in when compared to yours?
I would definitely say, if you're experiencing domestic violence, call the police. Make them listen. Keep at it until someone hears you. I feel like that's why a lot of women, don't report it. It's because a lot of times it's not taken seriously and things are not done. Make them listen. Keep reporting, keep calling, and do what you need to do to keep yourself safe. Remove yourself from the situation. Get a restraining order. Do whatever you need to do to make someone listen and to see that this is a serious situation so that you don't end up in the same shoes.
And that's sound advice, and hopefully if there is anybody out there listening that's going through that, they will take some kind of actions to protect them or to protect their children, to keep themselves safe.
Yes, I definitely wouldn't wish this on anyone else. We are healing, but it's slow, and you can't replace what you've lost. At the end of the day, my son still doesn't have a father, and I lost my best friend. Me and Michael were not only in a relationship, but he was my best friend. So the person who I would talk to about this situation is not here. And I'm going to one day have to explain to my son why his dad's not here and the horrible story behind the whole situation.
And hopefully by then that you've grown and healed some and have some outlook that will help tell him that, break that news to him, and he can deal with it in a way that will be helpful and not harm him emotionally or. Yeah,
I really hope that he can find peace with this. Just as I would say, I hope that me and my daughter can find peace with this. And I hope that this is one of those situations. I've always said I don't want my children to have to recover from their childhood. So I hope this is one of these things that we can, get help for and hopefully see the light at the end of the tunnel. And this is not something that we have to suffer through our entire life. That maybe we can get it under control and move past it. That's what I hope.
Well, I know this is still very fresh for you, and the pain and stuff that you're going through is got to be still very on the surface. And I appreciate you opening up and sharing with us and helping deliver that message about domestic violence, to spot those warning signs. And maybe there's no guarantee that this would have helped in this situation, but who knows? It may have, and maybe there would have been a different outcome here.
Yeah, I mean, I cannot say if the cops would have taken it seriously and issued me a restraining order, if that would have stopped it. I would just hope that maybe it would have deterred it, but you never know until you try. And I just felt like I was kind of a sitting duck when I took them out. When I went to the sheriff's office and reported it, and I'm like, okay, are you going to go, pick him up now? And they're like, oh no, we have to investigate it and this, that, and the other. I'm like, so you're going to go basically tell him that I have accused him of doing all this, but not arrest him? I was like, that's a death sentence. And I got out and walked out. I wouldn't even finish filling out the paperwork because I was too scared for him to find out and me not to have protection.
And that's got to be a feeling that, here I am looking for help from you, and you're going to make things worse, possibly.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I felt like I was literally in this by myself.
Well, again, I hope that you and your family continue to heal and can put this behind you as best as you can, and that things improve for you as you go along.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Thank you once again for joining me for this episode of The Murder of My Family. Special thanks goes out to Debbie Buck at TrueCrimeDiva.com for writing and research assistance in this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, please introduce a friend of the podcast and invite them to listen. Once again, just a reminder, October is National Domestic Violence Awareness Month. If you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, there is help available. You can visit websites like ncadv.org or breakthecycle.org for support and guidance. As we wrap up this episode, I'd like to invite you to listen to a preview of a true crime podcast that I think you'll really enjoy, called Let's Taco About True Crime. Be sure to give it a listen. And before you go, remember that every murder victim means something to somebody.
Hey, you know what? Just like you, I love true crime. I love it so much, I started a podcast called Once Upon a Crime. On that podcast, I give you a new true crime case every week in a storytelling style. In my new podcast, I've decided to give you a little taste of something different. Because you see, I love to discuss true crime with others, and I don't get a chance to do that often enough. I started to feel like I was missing out on the conversation. Now, I know you have plenty of true crime podcasts to choose from, many in a discussion-style format. I mean, you can take your true crime with a beer, or a martini, or a glass of wine. But until now, you weren't offered true crime and tacos. And really, what could be a better combination? But seriously, I started this new podcast because I want to talk about the things you want to talk about. Each episode, I and a featured guest host will share, review, and discuss everything true crime. We'll talk about the newest true crime documentaries and series, breaking true crime news, the latest buzz about true crime and social media, and even trending news and gossip about your favorite true crime podcasts. You never know who might join us. Guest hosts might include your favorite podcasters, investigators, journalists, documentarians, even celebrity guests. The only prerequisite is that they love true crime and tacos. So take a seat at the table, grab a taco and your favorite hot sauce, and join me, your host, Esther Ludlow, and let's talk about true crime. You can find Let's Talk About True Crime wherever you listen to podcasts. That's TACO about true crime. Just look for the cute taco logo.